just to keep everybody in line with what we're doing. Hopefully it passes off well, and it passes an hour and a half, or whatever it may be. I suppose this time of the year with COVID and everything, there's not much football happening, so this is an opportunity that we probably don't take advantage of often enough to reminisce about the past Blaney success and about teams and football and so on. So this is a good opportunity where we can connect over football. As I say, it's a Saturday evening. You can have a cup of tea, glass of wine, bottle of beer, can, whatever it is, in Bugsy's case, and we'll fly through it. Hopefully, everybody enjoys it, and we'll make more of these nights over the next coming weeks. So, first of all, thanks to Declan for volunteering being the first stop. No better man, I don't think. Everybody associated with Blaney and from further afield knows all about Declan and his achievements in the past, and I suppose what he means to everybody in Blaney and Castleblaney Faughs. So it's a great opportunity to pick Declan's brains on I suppose past glories and memories that he has from playing football. And then as we go on later on in the conversation near the end, we're going to put Declan on the spot a bit and get him to commit to the best players he's played with, toughest opponents, best players he's managed outside of the club, and his favourite memory in being involved with Blaney over the years. So that's the way it's going to work for the evening. And if there's any problems with your link or your sound or anything like that, the best thing to do is either just log off and log back in using the link you come in with, and it might improve itself that way, so it will. So if there is any comments or any problems with sounds, we're at the mercy of technology on my side and your side as well. So just put a comment up in the box. I'll have a look at it and see what we can do. I have other laptop, phone and everything on standby here in case there's problems on my side. So hopefully it goes smoothly, and it's just after 8 o'clock now, so we'll make a start on it. Welcome, Declan. How are you keeping?
All right, Stephen, or is it Piers Morgan or Stephen Dignam?
I don't know. Once you don't call me Ryan Tuberty, I'll take any of them. I'm just waiting on Jonathan now. He'll throw in the Marty Morrissey, so we will, but we'll not go there yet, so we won't. So thanks, Declan, for sitting down with us. Looking forward to this chat. We have a bit of prep work done, so I sent Declan a load of questions during the week. I ripped them up as soon as I sent them, put them in the bin, and I have a whole new questions for him over the evening, just test and put him on the spot. Keep him honest.
I can throw out the notebook.
Yeah. I suppose, Declan, just to start it off, we'll start at the start. As a young 16-year-old, you made your debut in '82 as Blaney attempted to stop Scottstown from winning the 6 in a row. They went to the well with them in '81, where they took them to a replay and had a couple of tight matches, but didn't stop them from winning the 5 in a row. So in '82, it was definitely very much the mission to stop that 6 in a row. What was your memories from that?
From '82 itself?
Yeah, just from a young player coming into a Blaney senior team.
Yeah, it can't happen nowadays. Obviously, 16-year-olds wouldn't be allowed to play senior football, even 17-year-olds. But yeah, McGraw would have took me in. I was still a minor. I was minor the following year. But at that time, there wasn't no big communication. You never knew whether you were nearly on or whether you were 30th man on a panel. And so we played the first round of the championship, and I have a bad memory on games and incidents, which you'll discover over the next hour. But we played St. Tibbert in the first round. The things I do remember seem irrelevant to the actual game or to the result, but they are silly wee things in games, or maybe not that silly. Is the things I do remember. We played Clontibbert in Annamullen in the first round of the senior championship, and that time the team was named in the dressing rooms before the match. Like, you weren't told on a Friday and given time to maybe think about it or whatever. But I was lined out corner forward when McGraw read the team out, as you say, as a 16-year-old. But the man I was on was Sean Moan, which would be Desi and John Paul's father. Now, me at 16 and Sean Moan probably at about 36, but to me looked like 46. So that was my first christening. I don't remember anything of the match, to be honest. I don't remember if I ever touched the ball or didn't touch it. The only thing I remember of that match is that John Moan was doing as all cornerbacks done at the time. He was pulling and dragging and tipping and tapping at me. And my father was down behind the wire at that corner, and he started shouting out at me to stick the elbow in him. He started giving direction, pointing his elbow. And I looked at Sean Moan and looked out over the wire, and it was more or less a case, are you joking me? You must be joking here. So I didn't do what he was telling me to do anyway. It would have suited him, but I was in no position to be at it. So that was the first round. And then the semi-final came against Scottstown, which was obviously the biggest one. Yes, it was rare on the 5-in-a-row team, the 60s and so on, listening. We still are, and the great men they were and still are. But the six and stopping Scottstown was the big one, and obviously McGrath's drive and the older men on the team knew this was the one. I didn't really know it was the one as such. It was just a game, and like that, the team was right out, and I was corner forward. And I was on Martin McCarville was the cornerback, similar build and physique to Sean Moan. He was Jerry's brother. So the same type of thing. I don't remember anything from that match. Again, whether I got a kick at it or didn't get a kick at it or anything about it. But we won the game anyhow, and we went to the county final in Annamullen against Ballybay. And again, like that, the team wasn't named until more or less an hour before the match, or even less. But at that time, in particular, men came out of the woodwork for county finals. Players that you maybe hadn't seen that much of were suddenly arriving on the scene. So the team was named, and I wasn't corner forward. There was a sub on it. Now, you took what you took. There was no expectancy from me, I suppose, to be honest. But at that time, you had Desi Mulligan and Pat McGinney and a few of the old soldiers. They were nearly gone, but they were back for the big thing, to do the big job, and that was the way it was. But at half time, I came on for my God when I was growing up was Eamon Tavi. I thought there was nobody like Eamon Tavi. He used to be down in the field and he'd appear out and maybe do a lap or two. That'd be all, no more. But he'd do a lap or two of the field, and I'd be sitting on a ball with my mouth open, staring across at him, watching him. So it was ironic that in 82 at half time, McGrath called me out. I was going on wing half forward, and the man that was coming off was Eamon Tavi, who was centre half back, I think, at the time. He was near his end. He was nearly finished, but he wasn't. And it was sort of an unusual one for me, because I was looking and saying, wait a minute, I don't want Tavi off type of thing. But I was put on anyhow. And my christening for the third championship match was another Egypt, was Damien McBride, a cousin of my father's, but one of Ballybea's longest servants at wing halfback. So Tavi came back on the same day. We were under the caution at half time. It was a gale force wind, and we might have been only a point up after playing with it. The tide turned for us. We got a grip of the match, and it was there to be won. So Tavi was sent back in, more or less, to possibly in to win the game. I was too young to know. Not for me, luckily enough. So the match finished, and we were county champions, and Scottstown had lost out on their 6 in a row and all that. One of the few things I remember was that McBride, as I say, a good friend of mine and my father's, would have said later on in the week or something that we, whatever 16-year-olds after winning a senior championship medal, and I'm playing 15 years trying to get one and haven't got one, so it sort of put the thing in perspective. I wouldn't have... my following year as an 83 minor captain would have meant more to me, believe it or not, as that 82 senior championship, because I was probably a child at an adult's party, didn't really know what was going on was doing what I was asked to do. And that was the way it was. Like I was at school the next morning at 9 o'clock. It was normal day for me. The next day there was no hullabaloo about it.
There was no Wonder Club.
What?
There was no Wonder Club for you.
Well, there was a Wonder Club, but I wasn't in it. I wasn't in it. No. And that time the Monday Club would have travelled. The Gunner and Nudie and them boys, they would have left. They would have went to Ballybay on the Monday night, as they would have went to Scotstown on county final nights. And so that was the way it was done at the time, and vice versa. Where Scotstown would have come to juniors and that, but our Monday Club at the time would have went to Ballybay in this case in '82 and drank with them and in them, and maybe an odd flurry possibly, but it was the way football was at the time, and it was good to see.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned there that the following year you won a minor championship. There wouldn't be too many would win a senior championship before winning a minor championship.
No, well, possibly not too many, and now you can't. There's definitely nobody to be doing it now because you can't play the rules of the game. But the following year, as I said, it probably meant more to me. It was my age group. It was your boys, it was your friends and classmates and so on that you were playing with. Vincent McDonald, Vincey was over us at the time. It was actually a very important year as well as '82 in a similar mould in the fact that Scotstown had a boy, Kevin McCary, at left half back, was going for 4 championships in a row, 4 minor championships. And Jerry Fitch is the holder of 4 on the record. No other man has it. So it was a big driving force. Again, Vincey was from that era and knew the importance. And I can remember to this day, the dressing room before the match, that this is what was drilled into us, that nobody out there on a Scotstown team could lace the boots of Jerry Fitch. And were we going to do anything about it type thing? And we won the championship. We actually played Scotstown in Blaney because they were in the senior final and they wanted the 2 teams on the one day playing together. So the match was in Blaney. We won it comfortable enough, in my memory, maybe 7 or 8 points, but I wouldn't accept a distance. I don't know where it came from in me, but it stayed with me for a long for years. Where I remember being centre half, maybe 4 or 5 minutes to go, 7 or 8 points up, and I was still shouting and shouting at boys to pick up men, and the game was over. But it was never over with me, which was a wee bit of a nutcase attitude. But the game was never over with me. And it carried on into when I was a manager. I would never have give boys a run in a championship match unless you were 10 points up with 2 minutes to go. I don't know where it came from because I never had the experience of it working against. But that built into me that it was never over until it was over.
Yeah, and then following on from that, you won your championship in '82, but there was a bit of a dry spell. Scotstown come back very strong then after that. I think they won 3 in a row, so it took you a while just to get back to the top table as such. But when you did then in '86, it was a massive year. You were on the one first Ulster club that year. So just about that year, and particularly the Ulster win.
Yeah, well, I suppose when you win the first one in '82, you think you're going to win every championship. You've arrived.
I think you beat Scotstown in the first round that year.
In '86.
In '86, yeah.
Who did we beat in the final?
I don't know. It doesn't matter, does it?
It's not that. We're moving on to bigger things.
No, I don't have it.
No, well, we won the championship in '86. Noel Shields was over that team, was managing, or Noel was captain of that team in '86, playing a right half back, and was very, very good captain in the sense that if there was a man missing from training, he'd nearly go looking for him and go and pick him up, and he'd be driving around lifting boys and ringing boys. He was very organised and very tuned in, and really drove the thing that year to make sure that everybody was available, everybody was training, everybody was fit, and it paid off because a championship was the big one for years in Blaney, and then the Ulster Club meant very little. But at this stage, from possibly the early 80s, Ulster clubs became massive competition that it still is today. So Shields probably seen this, the championship, there was more to it than this, and there was a huge push then to go on and give the Ulster Club a good run. Probably, we played Bourne in the athletic grounds. Do I remember much of the match? Not particularly. I was full back at the time. I don't remember any involvement in the match, but I've a trophy at home for man of the match, so I must have done something.
Yeah.
I actually don't remember any. It was very, very low scoring. 4-3 was the result.
4-3,
yeah.
Joe Brawley wouldn't have been happy with that.
With 4-3, no, and there was no mass defences. I'll tell you why it happened. And Dermot Murphy was in goals and never conceded a goal in the Ulster Championship. But he had 6 inter-county backs in front of him at some level, minor, under 21 or senior. So there was a great wall in front of him there, and that's why it was 4-3 from our point of view. Bourne, on the other hand, had the Paddy O'Rourke's and these men on the other side of the field. So it was really a game where there was 2 very strong defences. I had the disadvantage, of course, of being full back, as I was on a few occasions, and Nudie centre half. So when you're full back and you look out and you don't see anybody from there to about the middle of the field, it's a tough job because Nudie was never where he was supposed to be. He was always somewhere further up the field. My big, what I do remember of it was an unbelievable homecoming. And I don't know, I suppose technically it wasn't our first Ulster club. We won one in 19-15 or very, very early days, but it seemed like our first Ulster club title, and we came up Mucknow Street, obviously, and I never seen anything like the homecoming now, the tour around the town. It stood in my memory to this day. Like.
Yeah, and you mentioned that prior to this, Ulster Club was never big on the radar. It was kind of a take it or leave it thing nearly. Was it Scottstown winning in Ulster maybe that kind of says that they can do it, we can do it?
Yeah, it was before my time that the Ulster wasn't an interest really. Now, Blaney played in an Ulster final in the 70s against Bundoran and Ballyshannon joined. There might have been St Brendan's, a bit Brian McGinnis playing, and that it would have been Jerry Fitch and them. So it's maybe unfair to say that it was dismissed, but there was no doubt with McGrath that the big one was the championship, and anything after that it was a bonus. But possibly when Scottstown started winning a couple, we opened our eyes and said, this is something worth winning. And luckily enough, in my time, we've won it twice.
Yeah, and going on then from that, from Ulster into the All-Ireland series, and I know there was you beat a London team or an English team prior to taking on St Finbarr, and you probably were well fancied at that time. Burren probably were All-Ireland champions, I think, when you beat them, and won it again the following year, so they were very much the kingpins of club football. But St Finbarr went to replay down in Cork. But both games, I think you've left yourselves an awful lot to do. We're well behind in the game, battled back both days and could have won either game. Yeah,
well, the one in Blaney, we were 8 or 9 points down at half time and came back and actually led the match. We were a point up with maybe a minute or two to go, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but I think he was a boy called Michael Slocum. He played with Cork at the time. I think the ball broke out at the dugout side at left half forward position, and he pulled on it. From what I remember, he just pulled on it, and it dribbled and went over the bar to level the match. Right. So they ended up drawing with us that day. Then we went down to Cork. Possibly, we had missed our chance or missed our boat, would have been most papers. There was a huge crowd from Blaney and Monaghan went to Cork because football was good at the time. Club football was good and Blaney were good. Entertaining, I suppose, if you want to call it. So we went to Cork in a similar incident. We went 8 or 9 points down at half time and we were dead and buried, but we weren't. We came back. Don't think we went in front. I think we came back to a point and maybe conceded a goal, a poor goal at the time. And came back again, but could never just. I think we were beat by a point in the replay. Yeah,
and they went on and won it that year. I remember going down. One of probably early memories of following Blaney was down to Cork, and every town you went through down on the road down, you were seeing Blaney people standing or morning people on the way down, and we were staying out in Fermoy and in the hotel. The Mcgows were in it, and there was another half of Blaney people in it, and. You probably don't recall Derry City were playing a big game at the time in Cork in the Cup, I think it may have been, and they had a fierce following at the time, but they were very non-sectarian in that you weren't allowed to wear tricolours or Irish flags or anything like that. So we were in from standing in Blaney gear, green and gold and all this, and all the Derry ones were given out, take off them colours, you're not allowed to wear them colours and so on. So it was a long spin home. I'm sure it was a long spin home for you that day as well after it.
It was wild disappointing. Like you don't get many chances to get to that stage where you win a game of 60 minutes and you're in an All-Ireland final, whether it be club or county. They only come, they may never come. So we had our chance and we didn't take it. Now Fem Bars were a good team. They're a good team now.
Yeah, and then I suppose won that year, lost the championship the following year, won in '88. Probably the new players coming through then, the Morleys and Sullys and Eddie Murphy and Pippin and them boys, and took another while then to win Ulster, but it did come in '91. I suppose prior to we go to '91, 1990 was the famous final up in Carrick against Enniskeane. I suppose everybody remembers the result that day, and how important it was. What would be your memories of that day?
Again, very little, and the ones I have would seem very irrelevant to the actual game, but it's the only memories I really have. I'm disappointed in an extent that I don't remember a lot of the goings on in games, and I don't understand why. I think it is that I always felt there was too much at stake. I can't say, it would be unfair to say that I never enjoyed county finals or never enjoyed these games, but I do think there was too much, from my view, there was always too much at stake to be looking around you or to be enjoying it to some degree, which left me then with very little recall of them when the likey Hughes asked me. I do remember the bonfires at half time. I do remember that because it was me. I heard it. Megan, I hope he's not tuned in. That's a myth, one of these stories that may or may never happen, but I can tell you it did happen. Light the bonfire, they were roaring out into the crowd behind the goals, light the bonfires. So McGrath had something to say. McGrath wasn't over the team. Dickie and Fitz was over the team, two good men, but McGrath was always sort of lurking in the background and stepped out that day at half time in the dressing room and give it to us proper. And as you say, the most famous county final of all in airtime, probably to come back and win it. The strange thing is, and I'd like to see the match. I don't think I ever seen that match. We didn't come out and score 2 or 3 goals to win it and turn the game on its head. We chipped away, and they chipped away. But if we got 2, they got 1, or we got 3, they got 1. And eventually it came down to a game to be won where a goal was going to win it. And Stephen White, of course, got the flick across the square and flicked it into an empty net. At that stage, the goalkeeper had come out to do him. In my memory, he took his eye of the ball on the notion that he was going to nail White, and by taking his eye of the ball, any contact at all was going to flick it into the empty net. Now, people mightn't remember, that wasn't the final whistle. The game went on. And as games do or referees do, it came up the field and the referee gave them a free to draw the match. And at that stage, a draw, everybody would have took a draw. We'd have taken it. They would have taken it. So they got a free about 35 yards out. And this is one of my main memories. The gunner, it was a fella called, a good footballer called Jerry Callan was taking the free, but Phil the gunner, I was on the line. Phil the gunner was out about 10 yards from the kicker, and all I remember is the prayers that he was saying out to Callan and the good wishes that he was giving him. So much so, and it was a scoreable free to draw the match, so much so that the ball never raised 3 foot of the ground and went wide. And the kick out, the ref had no option then, only to blow the final whistle. So there are a couple of silly memories I have of it. But at least
doesn't get the credit he deserves. It.
No, the man's a legend.
And poor John Megan's often reminded about that too, about the bonfires when he the pub in Blaney. It was a regular. Yes. I don't think he'll ever forget it.
No.
Yeah. And I suppose that sets us up then for the next year, which was the next big one, another run. Beat the Harps in the final. It was Emmy Vale. You beat in the final in '86 in Monaghan, and then the Harps in '91. Probably a different team then from the team that you had in the first Ulster. For this one in '91, you had Morley and that very much embedded in the team. Beat Killybegs in the final that year. Another good run. You've probably played a lot better now just from reading the reports and that on that run. Beat Killybegs up in Oma, and another All Ireland series against Thomas Davis then after that. So it was good times.
They were good times, yeah. The Killybegs match, they're a good team now. Manus Boyle was full forward after being man of the match in an All Ireland. Maybe the year before, no, the year after, but that's the level he was playing at. They had a very good player. Barry Mcgowan was playing in the middle of the field, I think. Was a problem for us as far as I remember on the lead in. He was going to be an issue, but while they might have Mcgowan, and I hope I have the right name, while they might have had Mcgowan, we had Eddie Murphy at this stage. So Eddie Murphy cancelled him out or sorted him out, which was a big achievement at the time. My memory of the '91 final, again, it's a silly thing, and has got to a point where it may not have even happened, but it's the only thing I remember. We were maybe 2 points up coming into the later minutes of the game, and a long ball was played in. Tom Russell at this stage was cornerback, and Tom made the charge out for the high ball and completely misjudged it. And the corner forward caught it on his chest in behind him, about 25 yards out from the goals, but nobody between him and the goals, only the goalkeeper. And all I remember is when he caught the ball and spun, Georgie was in goals, and Georgie just left his lane and roared out of him and scared your boy. Well, maybe not scared him, but panicked your boy into snapshotting what should have been a steady enough score, snapshotting it, and he kicked it wide. And while it may seem silly, to me it was the winning. It may seem a silly thing to remember. To me, it was the winning of the game, because he had the chance to put us down, and Georgie, not by any expert save, by just coming out and roaring, nearly panicked your man, and your man blasted the ball wide. A big super achievement.
So that was two finals in a row won by the Dark Arts.
One, yes.
Gunnar and Georgie.
Yeah.
Two quiet fellas.
Why, two quiet men, yeah. Two very quiet men. We went on then to Thomas Davis, as you say. There was a mistake made for the Thomas Davis, and it's nobody's fault. It's one of them things that happened. It's certainly not Jerry Fitz and Dickie was over us. We went to the Cool Key Lodge and had breakfast or whatever we had at it, tea and scones, whatever. And then we went to a trade to warm up in some pitch, maybe 3 or 4 miles from it. And then we came back to the Cool Key Lodge. But while all this was going on, the time was clicking on, and we ended up running very late. Now, when I say late, we were in the bus driving up the street towards Parnell Park, and the referee was on the field blowing his whistle. So there was an awful rush, panic. There was men getting strapped, boys getting rubbed, boys in the toilets. Dickie was talking, Jerry was talking. And it probably, by the time we got out, there was very little warm-up done. We should have, looking back, if we got caught late, we should have dictated the time the match was going to be starting at, because they couldn't start without us. We should have done what we had to do, but we got into a bit of a panic maybe, rushed onto the field, and probably took us 10 or 12 minutes into the game to settle, which at that level is costly. I think, as far as I remember, we've done fairly well on them. Paul Corn of Dublin was centre half, would have been their key man at the time, would have been one of their stronger players. Again, my only memory of it is a downfall of my own. I remember having a ball at the left half back position, getting the kick blocked, and eventually 2 or 3 plays later it was stuck in the net. Is my only memory of the match. I'm not even sure what we lost by, but it was one that got away from us again. We were good enough. We had a good enough team that time to go on and contest an All Ireland final, but again, it just wasn't to be.
Yeah, and I suppose too, there was a big gap. The Ulster final would have been played before Christmas, and then it was the spring when the semi-final or Ireland was. You probably lost momentum because you were going that well in Ulster at the time. You were top dogs, like waiting to march on as such.
Yeah, possibly, but that's still the way it is. It's still the way it is. So teams still win their Ulster or their Connacht or the Leinster. They're still waiting until February for the next match. So that hasn't changed. It does seem strange, and I know there's always talk about playing it off in the calendar year. It would make more sense if it could be done. Possibly lost momentum, but definitely lost our way. Got caught out timing-wise. As I said, nobody's fault. Just the whole city thing caught us out with traffic, and ended up maybe in a bit of a rush job. As the ball was thrown in, we weren't settled, and might have cost us a bit at the start,
Yeah, and I suppose again the next year. Sorry, there's just somebody on with their audio on there. If they could just switch it. I know. That should be that now. I suppose going back then, moving on, what seemed to be a common occurrence challenging for Ulsters, it was the last one you would have won, and into the 90s there was a number of occasions you also always threatened to get back at it, but it just never happened for you, through nobody's fault, I suppose. I suppose just the quality of Ulster football makes it very hard to win an Ulster club.
Yeah. The quality of the Blaney team was still very high. We weren't any worse off. We still were very strong. But as you said, the Errigal Kieran's, the Belahis at the time, Cross was coming into play at the time, Kingscourt and Cavan were consistent. We were one of them teams, but as you say, just we never competed in a final actually since the 91.
No.
Obviously at this day and age or this time of our football, we'd settle for a lot less. But at the time, you would have thought you might have took another one, yeah.
Yeah, and in the 90s, I suppose we remember Blaney, the pictures around the town, the team of the decade. Great picture that was done of the winning captains from the 90s, but it didn't look that way early on in the 90s. There was a few losses again, 92, 93, 94. Nothing happened in terms of championship, but there was actually would have been your first league title, I suppose, in 94, and it kind of built the backbone of the team going forward again. Then another new players coming in, Strimmer and that would have joined in, and and again another push. And after that, there was 8 or 9 years. It was just winning a couple of close calls for another 5 in a row. Just didn't happen.
Yeah, but funny from the team of the 80s, we'll call it the Nudie McGinney era. And I've been lucky enough. I've played, I would feel, in 2 generations. I've played with that generation and was still there for a long period with the next generation, which is the Coochies, the Morleys, the Peter Duffys and them boys. But we got a huge injection at the end of the 80s from a minor team, one minor team, fed a huge injection. It was probably never seen since 62, 63, when that real good Blaney team came out as minors and went on and won 5 in a row. It took as long as this to get the same batch, but we got them. Like you're talking Morley, Duxie, Coochie, Peter, Ray, Sully, Dan, to name a few. Like, they all came off the one team and contributed for the next 10 years to the cause, if you want to call it. So that was a huge injection to come in at the early 90s to strengthen the team and to certainly strengthen the team. And then coming later on in the mid-90s towards the end, you got the extra boost then where you got the Tracy brothers, Kieran Strimmer, as you're saying, Mcgowan came in that time. All men that contributed hugely again for years to follow on. So there was a constant feed of real good quality players coming at that time. And that's why we dominated the 90s. And that photograph, Stephen, took us to the Canaries.
That's where I was going to. How are we going to get back to the Canaries?
Yeah, don't go there. You'll have to ask him and McGinney about the Canaries.
That'd be a whole another night's listening to the stories from the Canaries itself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Censored, adults only.
Just then moving on, I suppose, just to come at another angle for you. You played under like a lot of different managers and probably big personalities with kind of different styles and methods about them. Like, so when we talk a bit about them, like, you had your Liam Max, your Jerry Fitch, Jerry Smith even, and then you Emmy McGinney for a while, Dickie, of course, Pete. Just about them in general, like your memories of them and their kind of the way they would have approached things. I'm sure you were easy to manage, but there was other kind of work they had to do in the background as well.
Well, I'd have to admit it would be easy to manage. Like in the current climate, you hear a lot about managers, and it's the manager's fault generally. If I'm not even referring to Blaney, our own club, but in general at county level and Everton, if things aren't going well, it's the manager's fault, and he hasn't a clue, and this man hasn't a clue, and that well, to me anyhow. But I think in general that time it was irrelevant. Who was managed definitely was to me irrelevant. Who was managing the team? Mm-hmm. I can't say that I played under a manager that hadn't a clue or a man that didn't know what he was at. I can't say that ever happened to me. Whether it was my personality that didn't bother or didn't influence, but we went through a lot of managers. Outside men, for instance, I just scribbled down a note of them there earlier. PJ Carroll came in from Cavan. Actually won a championship with Tony Dunn as a trainer. 2 good characters, old school. Training was old school, but we got on with it and done what we had to do. Won a championship, and then wasn't taken back the following year. Again, because as you mentioned, Ulster Clubs was on the radar, and when we didn't get a run in the Ulster Club, it was deemed a disappointment. So it was a strange one.
Who shafted him? Tell the truth. No comment, no.
Well, I know who got him. Pat McDonald, the man that got him, he worked in the Anglo-Celt, and Pat had business in Cavan with the music. And Pat's the man that definitely got him lined up, but I don't think Pat's the man that shafted him. So,
no, it wouldn't be Pat's style.
Definitely not. Then we had other men. We had Paddy O'Rourke Down come in, an All-Ireland winning captain. Big pull like of a man that they get in, won a championship as well. Very, very fanatical GA man. Again, possibly old school in his way of thinking, and you'll get a gist here that I'll end up saying, is there anything wrong with this at the end of the day? But Paddy had nothing fancy, just pure passion, like the man to give it back to him, and nobody gave it back more than Ray at the time. Paddy would have told me on more occasions that Ray McArdle, pound for pound, is the toughest man on the Blaney panel. There'd be nobody arguing with him. John Rafferty, another, and I've actually been in fair touch with most of these boys ever since. John Rafferty came in again, old school. I could tell you now, if he came tomorrow, what the training session would be like. It was tough. You were sent down to a corner. You were 60 seconds or 30 seconds, whatever it was, and until you were crawling out on your knees. But we won the championship. It was 03. It was the last one. John left then at the start of the 04 season, and that we haven't won one since. Who else was Ross Carr? Came in, another All-Ireland winning medalist. Came in that period, in this period, should I say, where we haven't won a championship. And the other man that actually didn't manage the team, but a huge contribution to the Faughs club, was Dominic Harrigan. Pete took him in as his first training job. Pete took him in after being successful with St Michael's and Enniskillen. Pete got in contact and took him in, and he got an awful graft for the club and had been involved with Pete, and then came in Paddy O'Rourke's time as well to help out with the training. So he had a huge input, was very well got in the club, and would still to this day be texting and checking up about how's things going with the club, or, dare I say, what's going wrong with the club. Might be an odd text, but they're the main outside men. I might have missed one or two. Then you come to your inside men. Pete being one of the earlier ones, fanatical, as we all know, green and gold to the core, and portrayed that in his management. Like there was no shortcuts with Pete. It was as blunt as you could get. You would get it as blunt as it had to be coming. It was direct and straight out. Pete's policy or in management was really the circle the wagons type thing. Everybody hates us, which works. By times it works, but it certainly worked for Pete. It certainly worked for Pete. He drove it into us that everybody hates us and everybody wants us to be beaten, and so on and so on. So it certainly, he could get that across, and it worked, and he was very successful manager in that regard. Then Fitz and Dickey would have been another main core of your management. Two more green and gold to the core, which nobody could have anything but respect, and had a lot of success, as you're after mentioning, the Ulster Club in '91 and so on, being the pinnacle, I would imagine, for them boys. Two great men, and dare I say, back to the old school, like nothing spectacular, nothing fancy, but got the message across of what it meant and who we are, where we come from, type thing, which is always a theme throughout Blaney teams, senior teams, and even down below. Who we are and where we come from is really the bottom line. And when you have Pete and Dickie and Fitch and Ian McGinney or something now, when you have them boys delivering that message, you know that it's coming from the heart. It can't really be put across from an outside man. Then that came Damon Mack, who was more innovative and more into coaching, and a lot more thought and work put into it, as in sessions planned, opposition sussed out, video stuff, very organised, very good. Bottom line, very good as well. And then had a couple of whatever successful years winning championships as well. But coming from winning them himself, as Pete did, coming in as managing, it was a simple transition. And again, because he was a Blaney man, he could get that message across, and had great success. Went on, obviously, to manage Monaghan and Louth after that.
Yeah, very good. And I suppose then, yourself, you moved into manager, and you were probably the most obvious kind of person that you would have picked out of a lot of Blaney teams as a future manager, or whatever. So you've managed in Blaney, outside of Blaney, in Blaney at various levels and all that. So I suppose, was it something yourself you felt you were always going to do?
Just before I answer that, I actually left out the king of them all there purposely. It was Liam Mack.
Yeah.
Who I have been lucky that I was playing in his era, because I would have very nearly missed his time. Probably at 5 or 6, 7 years where Liam Mack was manager or indirectly involved, and dead lucky that I was there at that time. Again, nothing fancy, no old school, green and gold, where we come from. So delivered at its highest now. This is at its highest. I mean, if I have to nail down the best managers, I'd have to say Sean McCaig and Liam McGrath. And both have very similar traits. When you walk out of a dressing room or walk out of a hotel room in preparation for a match, you knew what was coming and what was expected. And as they say, hair standing on the back of their neck all the time, every time the message was delivered, every time, with both McCaig and McGrath. McGrath in a tighter circle because he was Faughs and Faughs only, so he could manufacture and orchestrate the thing a bit better. McCaig probably had to spread it out over 7 or 8 clubs at different stages that was involved on the county panel. But they were the two kings of management with me, with no offence to any of the others. You mentioned myself going into management. I never, when you're playing, you don't really think, well, what'll I do in 2 or 3 years or next year? If I quit, what'll I do next year? So it never really entered my head. You probably realised you were going to be involved at some level. But I finished in 03, and I didn't finish. My Achilles finished me. But 03, I ruptured my Achilles against 4 Masters in the Ulster Club in Clones. Now, I'd been getting lasers and injections and ice buckets and for the full year to stick it out and win the last championship. So it was good enough for me. So there was no feeling sorry for me. I got what I justly deserved, but I didn't mind. I took it. It says, right, we've won the championship. This is the end. This is the end. But the next year, it was only finished, and T. Holland, for some reason, got in contact to see would have any interest in managing them. And I remember asking my father, I says, T. Holland's on to me about managing them. I says they're a good club. I know what his dealings was with them at any stage, but they're a good club there, and so why not? So I said, sure, we'll give it a go. So me and Don headed to T. Holland in 04, I think it was. They were intermediate at the time. They'd never won an intermediate championship. The funny thing was, a bit like Mayo, did some hoodoo on them, or at least they thought they had. Some priest or some old biddy had a dead wish on them that they would never win an Ulster or an intermediate championship. They'd won a league or two, but couldn't win the championship. So we went down and we had a great time in it. I have the great fellas, as most clubs are. We had great fellas, we had great players in it. Anyhow, won the intermediate championship, went up senior, and then I was in the dilemma. Straight away I had a decision. Do I manage a senior team against Blaney here? What's the rule and what's it? But no, it was never going to happen and never did happen. I said to myself, this isn't. So after only 12 months, I had abandoned ship. T. Holland, and as it turned out, they met Blaney in the championship the following year. But I was then manager of the Blaney senior team the year after that. So 3 years with the senior team, gapped out. Then another 3 years, and gapped out or chased out, whatever way you want to put it. Out anyhow. At the minute. So it's tough. It's tough when it's your own club. The expectations is high with yourself and with the team and with the club. So it's harder to take. When we had a couple of close years, we never got to a county final in my time on the management, but one in particular in Emmy Vale, a replay against Clontibbert, where I'm not a crier by any means, but we were hard done by a referee decision that to this day baffles me. They took the game into extra time. The ball hit the top of the post, landed in Kieran Hannerty's hands just outside the 6-yard box, and helpfully the referee blew the final whistle before he had a second to snap to do whatever he had to do. It was an unbelievable time to blow a final whistle. I thought, and I think everybody thought at the time. So it went extra time, and then we were narrowly defeated. So that was probably the closest we came to being in the county final. I always maintain if we were in it, we'd win it, but we never got into it.
Yeah, and I suppose then you're back involved with the club last year, and 2020 summer, I suppose none of us will ever forget. But without doubt, the highlight of it was the Sunday up in Enniskeane. And even in the weekends before that, where the minor boys and the minor girls got to the final, a hell of a game out in Cromartin. It was won at the death, and then the final itself. That 2 dramatic finals in the one day. You must have got a serious buzz out of that.
Yeah, you wouldn't believe, but it's probably one of the biggest highlights or memories of all my football times. And I said this to Morley after it at one stage, it was as good as winning a senior championship medal, there was no doubt. And there was a few reasons for it. The competition, the Division 1 as it was very, very competitive. There was brilliant teams in it, brilliant teams. Carmarthen had a great team in it. Harps weren't bad. Dunamane were very good. Maracloon were very good, but fell off the radar at a bad time. Very, very competitive league, stroke championship. Their aim at the start was to finish in the top 4. There was nothing more than that. We never spoke about winning the championship until we got into the top 4. Then we put it to the boys, we've achieved what we set out to achieve. Where do we go from here? So the onus was put on them a bit, and they came up with the right answers and then delivered afterwards. But one of the biggest satisfaction I got out of it was that at the start of the year, and it was a funny year, and we were lucky, got the competition played. We were allowed to train. We got the competition played, and that the final went ahead before there was any real clampdown. But at the start, there was Damien, Morley, myself, and Strimmer. And Strimmer was taking the training, and it would be very, very good, very innovative in his ideas, as we know. Very technical in his training and so on. Then after 3 or 4 weeks, he was called into the senior panel that he had something to offer, which he had. So he left our management team, and we sort of decided, so we'll charge on as it was. Damien took over the training mainly, with a bit of input then from myself and Morley, and Aaron came in at a later stage. But the satisfactory part is, Stephen, I feel that you wonder in the current climate with so much going on with statistics and video analysis and sat-navs in the back of people's jerseys and so much technical stuff going on, that if the thing was done simple, black and white, and do the simple things right type attitude, how would it work? Now, when we were left with myself and Morley and Damien, that was more or less the thoughts. We'll do what we know best, which is simple. We'll kick the ball over and back across the field. We'll pick 2 teams and play a game. We'll play backs and forwards like it used to be, and so on and so on. Yes, we've done a bit of hard work with a bit of running and so on, but let's keep it simple. Let's create a bit of a spirit and a bond among these players that they want to be out, and it turned out they did want to be out. They were never missing, never missed training. They were always there, and it built on that. And to go on and win, and as used to, the 2 Carmarthen matches were as good as games as I've seen in years. The 2 of them, one in Blaney that Carmarthen beat us, and the one then in Carmarthen, the semi-final where we beat them. They were probably 2 of the best matches I've seen in years, both for excitement and so on, but the ability and the quality of the players on both teams, very high. So when we won the championship, it was, and then of course the tension and the drama that was at the end of it, a match that we probably should have had fairly comfortably in the bag, all of a sudden had turned on its head, and we were staring down the gun barrel of a defeat after dominating most of the game and playing most of the football. But our hero stood up at the time and left the win even more dramatic. And even on that, we had taken in Butsy. Damien had suggested one that would get Butsy out for Brandon McKeag for a few sessions, just take him on his own, do a few things, and of course Butsy, no problem. But you see the rewards for doing, again, the simple thing. Butsy showing him a few simple things, explaining things to him, and the reward that was there at the very end of it. Barry Hannerty came in at the semi-final stage as our medic. We hadn't even a medic at any stage up until now. Pete said to me, things is getting a bit further on here. You should have a medical man. So Barry came in, and the first day he came in was the Carmarthen match in Carmarthen, and our cornerback split his head open before the game started. Zach ran into the wall during the warm-up, and if we had no medical man, none of us would have known anything. But Zach got strapped up and went onto the field and played his match and played his usual best, and we won the game. So the biggest satisfaction, I think, out of it from our point, and I do feel we got possibly even more out of it than the players as far as enjoyment and satisfaction was. But the fact that we done it simple and no big, there was never team meetings, there was never videos, there was very little talk about opposition. Okay, there was key men and you highlighted them and you maybe picked your men, but it was go out there and play, and if you win the ball, move it on and volley it, express yourself. There was nobody ever was played on the limitations. I actually laughed. I seen it afterwards on the video, and Paddy Martin, who I would be fairly friendly with from Donaghmane, he was doing the commentary with some legend, some Brian Sherry, I think it was. But Paddy at one stage was saying, Blaney's a very defensive structure. They've worked very hard on this, and you can see it coming into play. I was laughing when I was listening to the video, like, defensive structure. We had no structure anywhere really on the field. As Morley pointed out, what is coaching? And I says, well, you're after telling such a man that he should swing on to his right more often. And he says, sure, that's not coaching, that's advice. So tell me the difference. Tell me the difference. So none of us coached. We give advice throughout the year, and it was super. It was super for them to win it. Yeah.
But you're saying now you kept it simple, and then you named a backroom team of about 6 or 7 men. You didn't name Rambo or Joe McDonald. You said 4 men with just in Dublin. So you said
I didn't name them men for the simple reason they were secret weapons. But now to say you're after hanging poor Jojo, who had fierce information for Damien, celebrated as much as anybody. Rambo, you're after hanging poor Rambo as well. Rambo was there, stats man, but we kept him on the quiet out on the terrace. But he done a huge part too.
Very good, very good. And just I suppose you mentioned all that goes on there. I read an article recently. It was one of the Kerry players, former players, Paul Galvin, I think it might have been, who said that nowadays Gaelic players spend 80% of their time chasing 10% of their ability, in that they're more focused on stats, GPSs, gym work, and that very few of them probably actually own an O'Neill's itself. Yeah. You need to go back to the basics.
Yeah, I'd agree 100% with him. I think he's right. The gym, surely it's easy for us to say, there's not a bit of call for it. There is call for it. It has its place. Sometimes players are overemphasised on the gym when maybe they should be out with 10 balls, catch kicking, place kicking, whatever your skill is, or working on your skill. But no, he's 100% right. It has gone too far away from the natural football. Yeah.
I have one first question in there. Grania Miller wants to know when you're going to take the ladies' team, minors or seniors. Either one.
There's enough there for the ladies. You've Crunch there Crunch will look after you. Paddy Conlon at Sale spin up the road every now and again. And yourself, Gráinne. There's plenty of help there. Laura as well. The ladies are going well and have good structure. And Keith, no, there's a lot of good people involved with the ladies, as we're all aware. And it's showing in the results. It is showing in the results.
Yeah. Absolutely. And just, I suppose we move on, before we move on to the final part, I suppose we'd have to touch just on your county career. A long career too, the 80s brought lots of glory in that. Apart from probably the first year you played, you're unlucky, you broke the leg against Tyrone. You missed the final, National League final against Armagh, the Ulster final that year. So we're probably a disappointment at the time.
It was. It broke my leg against Tyrone in the semi-final in Croke Park. For the second time, I had broken it 3 or 4 years previous at school at indoor football, but it was costly because an Ulster final or an Ulster Championship medal, to me, the 79 team, like Monaghan hadn't won a championship in 45 years or something like that, an Ulster Championship. So the 79 team were gods, and when you narrow that down to your own men, then where you had Nudie, Mulligan and Tavi, as I mentioned previously, Andy McArdle and Noel Shields was also involved on that panel. These men were idols. Like, I could nearly name that 15 to this day. They were put up in such a high, and rightly so. But to probably set the marker out that it can be done, that why not? Monaghan can produce teams to win Ulsters. It took a while from 79 to 85 for that to develop, but maybe the 79 team was an older team, and a lot of boys were probably on the wrong side of their best. So there was a transition, but McCaig, having experienced the taste of it in 79, obviously carried that through and seen a crop coming, a crop there and a crop coming in to inject it that was going to do things. So 85, not playing or not having an 85 Ulster Championship medal would have been a huge disappointment to me, because you knew what it was, you knew it hard to come. In my mind, it was never going to come again. It was a once-off. We got them every 20 years nearly. My chance had gone, and that was it. It was done and dusted, and you never felt part of that championship year then because you were out. So it was wild disappointing at the time, yeah.
Yeah, and I suppose moving into the 90s then, you did get your Ulster medal in 88 and had a big impact in the final that day against Tyrone. I think RTE gave Nudie man of the match, but one of the national papers gave it to yourself. And in the 90s, Ulster teams did the breakthrough then, and were winning All Irelands, the Downs, Donegal's and so on. But Monaghan just never seemed to get that break, to see it. A couple of big results, I suppose, the one down in Ballybuffet against Donegal in 95 it might have been, but you just never got that breakthrough in that might have got a bigger prize at the end of it.
Yeah, no, it's hard to understand why, because in the 90s, like, we Monaghan still had a good team, and were still keen, and felt every year you felt you could win an Ulster title, and you set out to do that every year. Like, you had boys like Jared McGowan, Brendan Murray was still there, McGinty, Eddie Murphy was there, Frank McGinney, Declan Smith, the Slowey brothers, Michael Slowey's a great player, Gregory Flanagan, Camartin. Like, Peter came in that year, you're talking about in 95, his debut again, Donegal, played terribly well. You had still a filter of great players and steady boys like Frank McGinney in the middle of the field, a core there as well. I don't know what went missing. Maybe it's something that I'd have high thoughts on our own club at the minute. Had we a lot of good players but no great players? Had we no outstanding? Had we no nudies in the 90s? Obviously we physically didn't have them, but had we no replacement for them? You had Steve McGinty, Declan Smith, great players, great corner forwards and so on. But had we that outstanding marquee players, not even as forwards, but up through the middle of the field, from full back up, possibly not as good, obviously not as good as what had left in the Sherrys and the Caulfields, the Movies and so on, Well, it was at the time. It wasn't actually disappointing because you were still training hard. You were still enjoying what you were doing. The crack was good by times. You still had your funny men. Like Gregory Flanagan was your funny man. Like I mean, there was more laughs in dressing rooms than you would expect or anticipate. There was still a lot of effort and a lot of commitment given. And at the time, it didn't seem like that this is we're going against the breeze here all the time. It didn't seem like that. You still felt each year that you were there or thereabouts, but we weren't. We weren't. And as you say, like the team in the 80s, we came up against obviously the Kerry in their prime, the Ulster teams in the 90s. Did they come up again the legs? You know, there was a gap there, and the Ulster teams took their chance and snapped at it. Our best team was probably gone, and while we were still, I would feel, still a good team with good players, the team that had gone previous was obviously better.
Yeah, and just from your county, you're one of the Blaney players that had represented Ulster, like, and I know back in the 80s and into the 90s, doing that was such a big thing as well. Like it was a rare thing. The Railway Cup, there was a bit of prestige to it, and for whatever reason, it has fallen away. That they just can't fit it back into the calendar, without merely maybe trying, or that there's reluctance to do it. But like representing Ulster with the great players that they had at the time, it must be up there as a great achievement for yourself.
It definitely is, Stephen. It definitely is, and I don't want to seem blowing at this stage, but also Railway Cups at the time were fading, but they were still big business. And I had come from looking and listening to Jerry Fitch of Ulster and Eamon Tavi of Ulster and so on. It's another long story of my father's motivational encouragement over a 10 or 15 year period, but to break it down shortly, like he would have always came on the ground, you'll never win a senior championship medal, and you never play with the county, and you never. So this was driven into me, and the more people, and it didn't bother me. Some boys might lack on the strand of it, but the more audience he had, the better. If he had Dickie and Liam Sterrett, Lord of Mercy, and the two of them in their kitchen, and one dare say that you played well yesterday, then the trigger would go off, and but he's not as good as I am. He'll never be as good as I am, and he'll never play with the county, and he'll never this. So Ulster was the knife in the wee jag at him. I could, at long last, I could turn around and say, "Did you ever play with Ulster?" Now that turned out as playing with Ulster to win 5 Railway Cup medals, which I would count for myself as one a huge achievement. Younger players now, and some younger people tuned in here don't even know what we're talking about, Railway Cups, but it was big. I had come from listening about Railway Cups from being young, and end up being in a position, first of all, to play, and then not alone to play, but to play in so many winning teams, as you say, with the Mickey Lindens, the Greg Blaney's, Jim Reilly at Cavan, Martin McQuillan Armagh, James McCartan, Peter Canavans, all unbelievable players. Felt slightly out of place most of the time, but McGinniff's thoughts was if you didn't let him down, you were going to be there. So I must have deemed myself not to be letting him down, so I was kept for a longer period of time.
Very good, very good. Now, just before we move on to the final part, where we put you on the spot to ask a few things there, just to kind of what Declan, I suppose, means to everybody at Blaney. There was one comment I got from an interview Nudie did, and he talked about Declan, and he says if you wanted to play tough, he'd play tough, but if you wanted to play football, he'd play football. So I think that all resonate with us. And then there was 3 other people that text, and I just asked them for one word they'd use to describe Declan. And one of them come back, leader. The other come back, Faughs. And then the other one come back, which I think is very true. He says, there is no one word. He's a leader of leaders, inspired a lot of our greats. And he says, Lockie itself means everything to him. it's a word that he goes to and uses that word, lucky, to motivate himself. So thanks to Joan, Barbara, and Anthony for that. No, three good lady men. There were the things. So we're just moving into the final part here, Declan. I'm going to put you on the spot a bit. So
I can't see you. You're going for tea, are you?
No, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
I hear you, but I can't see you.
Yeah, there's a comment there from Eamon McGinney. He just wants to let you know he played with Declan and his father, and Declan was better. Fair play.
That's another issue, not issue, but that when you come from players of the 60s or legends of the club, which Peter and Morley and Sully and myself and maybe others, but us four in particular, we came from fathers that were icons in the Penny Faughs club. It can be a tough job because you're always compared. There's always comparisons made about, your father was a better man, or your father done this. And I'm sure Peter and Morley and Sully can agree with me on this, but I can speak for the other three boys that with all the talk and the great men that all our fathers were, Morley, Sully and Peter were, in my opinion, were better than their fathers. So that'll put that straight.
There on the record now.
Put the pressure on the next generation.
Yeah. Right, there's Georgie. Good to hear from you, George. He's over in America there. Legend, as you, Declan. And I know Jossie's there over there in America listening in too. Porrick, Sherry over in London. So it's great to get a spread of people. Duxie's up in Dublin there. So just moving on, Declan, to your favourite GAA memory, your favourite Castleblaney Faughs memory over the years, and I'm sure you've plenty of them, but there's one that stands out to you.
Well, there is one. Like memories, as I said to you, memories don't be that great. Milestones maybe would be an equal word for it, as in 82 was a milestone, obviously a Faughs Senior Championship. First 83 a minor championship, and the reason a minor championship to me, Stephen, is big, and I always preach this to minor teams. You only get about 2-year window to win a minor championship. It's not like the leaving cert. You can't come back the following year and do it again. So you only, some players, exceptional players, get a 3-year gap. Most players get 2 years, and if you don't win it in that, then you don't have one. And I feel a senior championship medal and a minor championship medal are the two biggest medals in Monaghan GAA football. So, and that's including senior league and anything else that goes along with it. They're the two medals that's a must-have. 83, because of that, it's wild important to me that I got that minor championship medal. 86, obviously, the Ulster club, massive. 88, Monaghan Ulster medal that I thought was going to elude me. I'm not joining the ranks of the Eamon Tavies and the Adels of mine at the time. It was a big one, big milestone for me to have that medal. 91, the Kelly Beggs was a big one. 2013, interestingly, would be a big memory of mine in Clonard, the Ulster final, because the Monaghan team was invited to the 25-year anniversary. We travelled on a bus. We got a breakfast in Hillgrove, travelled on a bus, wives and girlfriends, sat together, introduced at half-time, back, had a meal together. Everybody was together and the spirits was high. Only added to, or hugely added to, the fact that Monaghan then took the field in minor and won their first minor title in maybe 40-something years. And a son of mine in the middle of the field, who 30 years earlier I had played in the middle of the field in a losing minor final. So for the minors to win, sort of set up the senior match as Jesus, could it be one of these days like that? The 88 teams here, minors have won an Ulster title. What's going to happen? And then the seniors to go out and beat Donegal. So it's a very memorable occasion. I'm sure for a lot of people that was there. I have a photo in the office in the shop of myself and Brian Sherry and Breon and a young Paddy Heaven on the field after the match. So every Monaghan person got very, very excited that day, and rightly so. It was massive glory there. Last year, you mentioned the 20 minor final. Huge memory of it. Obviously, is the more recent one, and I hardly forget it that soon. But for the reasons I give, that the way the players approached it, and the simple way that we as a management approached it, that see that it actually can work. You can still do the simple things right and be successful. So it was very good. Now to the biggest memory, and anybody that has maybe heard me at different one or two different events, it hasn't changed. It never changes. My biggest memory in GAA football is 99. We won the championship against Carrick, but it's not then. It's what happened afterwards is without doubt a way ahead of anything else that ever happened to me. We came in the Monaghan Road and the cortege of cars was lined up ready out there across from Carville's filling station, and we drove straight past. Somebody stopped at the first one and said, "We'll be back in 5 minutes." And every player drove straight past in the cars and up to the graveyard to the great Dickie Sullivan, right, who had passed away earlier that year after coming back in as a selector for Pete. Pete had a bit of encouraging, a bit of coaxing to do, and got him in luckily. And then he had passed away. We landed to the graveyard to Dickie, put the wee Mick sitting up on the grave, said our prayers, and then there was a bit of a lull for maybe 20 or 30 seconds. What do we do next? Until somebody lit up with the Faughs song. And when I say you could hear the song out in St Mary's Park, it would be no exaggeration. And that, to me, I'll never ever forget that. So delighted that happened, and that sticks out over 21 or 2 years playing senior football.
That's good to hear, and a memory like that will never leave you, and I don't think it leaves any of the boys that was involved that day. And it's great to have it heard again after all these years. But just moving on then to the next part, we're talking about your toughest opponent. Who's right up there? Your toughest opponent?
Oh, I have to get a space. Look at Christmas. Is that good? Yeah.
Well, I have a number one anyhow. After that, I could name maybe on my memory, name a 1, 2, and a 3 at the max. But the old cliches, they were all tough, but it wouldn't be far off the mark. But my toughest, in my opinion, the toughest opponent and the toughest man possibly I ever played on was Greg Blaney of Down, and I played on him a lot. We met Down brave and often at the time, both National League and Championship matches, and very tough man. The problem with Greg Blaney was, and it happened to me in athletic grounds in an Ulster semi-final, I was playing on him and I thought I was doing fairly well and thought I had done a fairly well job. Greg Blaney might have handled the ball 5 times, but the problem was if Greg Blaney handled the ball 5 times, it meant Mickey Linden scored 1-2, which meant that Down possibly won the game. It was as simple as that. If Blaney got the ball, there was a radar into Mickey Linden, who was sure to finish it off. So the more balls Blaney got, the more damage Mickey Linden was going to do. So little, even on a day that you would feel you handled him well, he would have a huge influence on the game because what he done was very effective, and could be the difference in winning and losing the game. We actually got on the bus that day after the match, and the radio was put on, and there was a bit of a report on the match, and it named Greg Blaney as man of the match. And I nearly cried. I nearly cried. That's why he was tough. Well, he was physically tough, but little was a lot for him. If he only got little ball, it was used to his highest effect, and was generally the difference on you winning or losing the game. Secondly, after that, and I think I only played him this man once, Eugene McKenna, Tyrone. Eugene, for the younger people listening in, was the Peter Canavan of his time, not similar in stature or skill level, but Eugene McKenna was Tyrone's, took over the mantle from Frank Mcgowan as legend. I was centre half in '88. McKenna was centre half forward. what were you going to do, like, with a man like Hughes and McGowan, So my only memory is back to this again. My only memory is him sidestepping me on the 40, going by me as if I wasn't there, cutting through the middle and kicking the ball over the bar. Is what I remember of McKenna. But as you said earlier, I have a man of match crystal sitting out my mother, so he mustn't have done it again. He would definitely. Well, he only played him on that once. The thoughts of having to play on him possibly, and the stakes, there was the high stakes. It was definitely building him up to be one of your toughest jobs to have to do, and then toughest opponents when you were trying to do it. The last isn't really a toughest opponent, but it only come back into my mind lately. I seen young Dermot early on that Lockra Gale thing, and TG Carr was very good, but we played in Gavin Duffy in a National League match, the old Gavin Duffy, Monaghan and Roscommon. Now, I was probably a young 19-year-old playing centre half back on an old Dermot Early senior at maybe 36 or 7, one of the all-time grades. But me being the new kid on the block, thought I could go out and knock him about and rough him up a wee bit, if you want to call it, as centre halves did at the time. As Ross Carr said one time, you put the Gurrier in at number 6 on every team. But the game was on about 20 minutes, and Early had obviously decided, I'm going to teach this young fella this gas and a wee bit of manners. And he was in tight to me shoulder, and the next thing he come with an uppercut of a box as tight as he could get it. Nobody would have ever seen it. And I shot my head back. He caught me under the chin. I thought my head was going to fall off me, knocked behind me. And I thought to myself, it was an early learning, not in the fact I don't think I was sensible enough to quit doing it, but at least you were sensible enough to realise that there could be repercussions. So it was it was a real case of I'll show this gas and what he can and can't do, and you got the message early on in your career, and you had to make the decision to continue on, or if I do, then I have to be aware that there can be a backlash.
Yeah, I don't think it put any shyness on, in fairness now. It might have just taught you a lesson to get your retaliation in early.
Real first, yeah.
Very good. And we'll not pass any comment that there was no Monaghan players in there as tough as opponents. We'll overlook that. We'll move on. Just another question that was put to you. Just before we can touch quickly on it. The 4 best players that you've managed outside of the Faughs, just in, I suppose, mostly Monaghan club football.
Yes, right. As I said, we went to the Holland early on after I finished myself in Dundon. Great players, won the championship. You had Ronahans, you had Askin, you had Ronan McNally, Paul Kyle, young Carl O'Connell at the time, which you could see coming as a very good player. He was very, very athletic and fast at the time. Developed very well in the coming years after that, obviously. But without doubt, to me, anyhow, in my opinion, the best footballer in Holland at that time was Gary McQuaid. The talk about the current day, the talk about that man's a machine, it was never talked about years ago. But if he was playing today, that man is a machine. That man was a machine, Gary McQuaid. Commitment level, his strength, his fitness, he had everything. Top class player, and proved it at county level after. Me and Eddie went to Tome. We took Tome. We were top of the junior league and came up intermediate on somebody winning the double. I think it might have been Carmarthen at the time. Like everything else, had their players, the Wilson brothers, the couple of McCooeys and so on. But the best footballer, again, in my opinion, in Tome at the time was Stephen Lamb, and has been possibly since. Gary Wilson would have been a tight shout, but Stephen Lamb to me was their best natural footballer, and I still can't understand why he didn't get a bit of a chance on the county. Everything he had was natural. He was just full of natural ability. He's one of them boys, I believe. He's good at golf, he's good at hurling, he's good at football, he's good at rugby. He's one of them rare fellas that no matter what they take up, they're at a high level. So Stephen would have been the best man in Tome. Me and Eddie was in Carmarthen for a year, where you had McVickers, you had the Buck brothers, you had Neil Flanagan, you had Johnny and Paddy McGuigan, and so on. Good fellas, but to me, at the given time, and he's been in London since, Johnny McGuigan was their best footballer, in my opinion, at the time. Very, very good player. Was on a county panel, probably would have been on a county team if he'd have been staying about. But him and the brother both went to London, which was a massive loss to lose two of your best players at the one time, more or less. And Carmarthen, to their credit, have stayed strong, and wherever they get them from, they certainly can filter in the very good juvenile teams, and they always get good players coming out of it. So the Barry Cares, the Hanleys of this world, they're always good. But Johnny was the best player in my time, in my opinion, in Carmarthen. Then when Emmy Vale was more recent, about 3 years ago, won the junior championship. Very good panel of boys, a lot of good players. You had McAllister brothers there, you had Collie Hughes in the middle of the field, Dan McMahon, exceptional corner forward, exceptional scorer, Aaron Loughan, full back, very good, and others. There was others, but without a doubt, the best player in Emmy Vale, and there's not an Emmy Vale man who'll disagree with you. And you talk about a machine, Ryan McGinnespie is a machine. His commitment to his club is second to none. When he's so committed to his county team, they've such a programme at county level of training and schedule and so on, and still in all he can not only appear at his club training, but actually train some of the time, which you'd be looking and saying, well, what's this man doing? But serious committed, and a serious athlete, and a brilliant footballer, as he's proven. And if you wanted who is the best of the whole lot of them, I would have to say Ryan McGinnespie, the best footballer that I've ever managed outside of my own club.
Very good. And you mentioned there McGinnespie and their county commitments and everything that they have. If you were playing now as a county player, do you think you would thrive even further in that environment, or were you happy that you played county football at the time when you did?
I don't think I'd make a county team at this time, and I'm not being smart. Right. I'm not being smart in saying that. I enjoyed playing, surely, when we were playing in the 80s and 90s. You enjoyed it, and I would have felt I was committed and so on. If it was in this era, I would definitely be committed. There would be no problem in what's asked of them nowadays. I would be doing it. But whether I would be good enough, because the game is so athletic, pace has become such a huge part of it, I don't think I'd be there to be given the commitment. I think it has changed. The type of personnel has changed. First of all, the not so fast man or the sluggish man, it's hard for him to feature. And even worse again, I think the flair player, the boy that has the unpredictable, the Peter Duffys, the Joe Brollies, the geniuses, the boys we pay in to see, are even getting it hard to get on these county teams because they're not towing the line. They're not doing what they're asked to do. But so their gift was to do what they weren't asked to do, or do the unexpected. Yeah. So I think that both of them players has probably lost out. The less athletic player, running wise, and the flair player that can do the bit of magic is possibly been left aside as well, because he's not towing the line.
Very good. Now I couldn't imagine a county team if Declan Loughman's playing football and he's not on it, no matter what you say about yourself. I think you've been too modest, but we'll move on. Just a comment there from Kevin Maloney there. He must be referring back to what Dermot Early done in yourself. I reckon you tried it in Ushin McConville subsequently. So good spot there, Kevin.
That's where I learned it.
Took a while to come out. It was a nice one though, I'd say. Just if anybody else has any comments in there, pop them up and we'll put them to Declan there. A couple of comments on the phone as well that saying Declan Loughman could play anywhere from full back to full forward, and he never looked out of place in any of the positions. So moving on to the big question of the night. Declan told me he's going to turn the phone off after this in case he's getting any phone calls with boys that didn't make the list. And I put it to Declan to name his 5 best Blaney players that he's played with. And it wasn't a case of him negotiating me down or up from 5. It was a case of me negotiating him down to 8. So I think he could have named the full 15, and even at that, he would have struggled to name them all. So I'll leave it to you, Declan. There, you've listed. You've given me. You reckon you've 8 Blaney players, the best you've ever played with.
I wasn't talking to you since, but I meant to tell you there was 17. No, I don't know what I have. There's 8 or 9, and you've hung me out on this one. The first one's the obvious one. The best player I ever played with is the easy one. It's the boys after. It's come to him at the end, but it's the boys after that you put the pressure on me. And the reason being that, as I said earlier, I've been lucky to play with 2 generations, or nearly 2.5 generations. There's a lot of players in that time, a lot of super players in that time, a lot of men that contributed to the cause in any given year. So to narrow down a 21 or 2 year senior championship football to 5 players wasn't going to happen, Stephen. But we'll give it a go, and apologise to the 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 that have maybe left out. I actually
Sorry,
did.
Bugsy.
Bugsy, no, Bugsy's down. Don't worry about Bugsy. we get him in somewhere. The first thing before we even get to it, I've scribbled down a note here of the type of players really that it took and takes to win senior championships. And in my case, took to win senior championships. And I can give a couple examples of the type of boys that fitted under the category. So that's before I get their answer. First of all, I had down inspirational players. Like for me, who inspired me, or who was the inspirational players at any given time that I played with. I mentioned Eamon Tavi before my time, but that I played with, I've wrote down 2, and I've been very good at that. While you've given me grace on the other one, I've wrote 2 down for inspirational players. And Phil the Gunner, 2 generations fit in here. Phil the Gunner, to me, when you were full back or centre half and looked out the field and seen the gunner with a big strap round his head and a big knee bandage, maybe 2 knee bandages on him, and him seeing very little but growling at everybody around him, you couldn't, but all he had to do was let a roar out of him in the middle of the field. And if you couldn't react to what he was shouting, or if you couldn't react to who he was after nailing or what he was after catching, then there was something serious. You were in the wrong place, we'll put it like that. You were on the wrong pitch, on the wrong team. Phil the Gunner, to me, just to look on it, and he said very little, either in dressing rooms or on fields, but he put the fear of God in me, and I was on the same team as him, we'll put it that way. The second man, and I'd say a lot of you will associate a good friend to yourself, but inspirational players, inspirational full stop, Jason Hughes. I don't know who you've coming up, Stephen, on your Saturday nights, but let me know if Jason Hughes is on your interview, because I want to hear it. I want to be there. When he was playing and when he wasn't playing, he was winning championships for us. He was the cause of winning championships, without doubt. I'm not here to tell his story, but what he has gone through and come out the other side, and his whole demeanour, his positivity, everything, he's an embarrassment to most of us. As I said, both on and off the field, he has won championship for us, and nothing to do with football. He's inspirational, full stop. On that, I remember we won a championship. At the time, Jazz had took sick. I was captain of the team, lucky enough, because it was very easy to drive a team to win a championship in the circumstances, similar to the 99 when there was a cause with Dickie. If there was a genuine cause, it was always easier to motivate and drive ourselves to reach the pinnacle. The year Jazza was sick was one of them. I was captain of the team, and received, and he possibly tuned in the night here, I received a letter. Now the young people, should I say, that's tuned in the night might know what a letter is, but I received a letter at the time from Raymond McHugh explaining the appreciation and what it meant to him and his family and so on, the championship win and the speech after it, if I have to tell the truth about it, and so on. And I never forgot it, because at the time letters, nobody went to the bother of sitting down and penning something, but I don't know where it is, I have to admit, but I don't need the letter. I know what it said. I remember it well. I don't know if I ever thanked Raymond, but that's the year that Jazza won a championship for us without kicking a ball. And as I said, on and off the field, in a football, out of football, inspirational, a Superman. All right, so we'll let him tell his own tale some other day. Secondly, a type of player again is the soldiers. You need soldiers. You need the tough men. The tough men to win championships. Men that if you're going to the trenches, you want them with you. They have to be there, and you'll win no championships without them. And I'm referring to Eddie Irwin, Sully, Dan Hughes, Jim McHugh, Pete McMahon, Eamon McMahon, Tom Russell, and possibly the king of them all, Ray McArdle. You can go nowhere without that type of player and the service that they've give and that steel, as Paddy O'Rourke used to call it, that's needed to win championships. They were the men that we had it, and they were the reasons we were winning it. And then lastly, before I come to your question, there's the finishers. These are the men we all carried the piano, but somebody had to be there to finish it. And in my time, I've been lucky enough to have a few great finishers on the team. And in my from them would be Duxie, Pádraig McDonnell himself, Kieran Tavey in America now, super finisher, and Stephen White, who came to Blaney working for Tony Cavill and spent 7 very successful years with our club. Won his few championships, his Ulster club and Ulster championship with Monaghan. Enjoyed every minute he was here, and is still good friends of the club, good friends of mine and good friends of the club. So there are 3 finishers, Duxie, Kieran Tavey and Stephen White. Now we come to the men that make the difference. Your list. We've got there. So the men that make the difference. Great players, right? In no order. I'll come to number 1, but in no order, and I mean in no order. We'll call my first generation of playing senior football, Eamon Mack. That's McGinney, not McMahon. Eamon Mack, all right, was one of the best, most skillful footballers in Ulster. Could kick dead balls left and right foot. Could catch high balls. Was an all-round footballer, an all-round player. Had his critics, as place kickers do, because you could kick 10 in a match, and the one you kicked wide could be the one maybe in the last couple of minutes or whatever. So needless to say, it was Eamon Mack got the blame for certain occasions when maybe he was after keeping us in the game or kicking 10 points before that. That's the nature of in particular, a place kicker. But Eamon Mack, to me, is one of the best players I ever played with. I suppose my best way of defining him is, would I have as many senior championship medals without Eamon McGinney? Definitely not. Definitely not. And if Eamon McGinney was playing with another team, bar Blaney, would we have won as many championships? I would also say definitely not. So that's my first man. Second man from the same generation is Declan Flanagan, the red fella, as some called him, but Flan as we know him. An exceptional player. Played, I believe, and I could be wrong, but I think I'm right, 4 decades for the Faughs. Played in the late 70s, played in the 80s, the 90s and the early 2000s. 4 different decades, which is, there's very few, if anybody does that. Played left half most of his football, but played in goals at a very vital few years for the club and won championships in goals. Denied an all-star when he was playing with Monaghan. He was good enough to be an all-star. I remember it well. A fella called Flanagan got cornerback from Mayo, which pushed a Kerry man to left half while Flanagan should have got left half, but it was Flanagan at corner back that we would have felt at the time knocked him off his perch, which we were sure about. But Flan, and not alone football ability and so on, the character that he was and is unbelievable. There would never be a dull dressing room, never be a dull dressing room if there was roars of laughter coming from inside.
The audio just gone, has
it? Can you hear me?
All good. I can hear Diggy.
Oh, that's all right.
If you heard a laughter coming out of a dressing room, you can be sure Flanagan was the cause of it. Both club and county, yeah. He offered an awful lot, both on the field and for relieving tension off it. He was the character of most of the teams he played on. Third man on the list, Coochie Duffy, Dermot Duffy. Dermot Duffy, Coochie was an elite athlete when there was no such thing as elite athletes. Nobody was ever referred to as elite at the time, but he was doing strength and conditioning when there was no such word or terms as strength and conditioning. He knew what he was at. He got himself into the best shape possible all the time. Naturally talented. He had power, he had pace, catching ability, he could score. All-rounder, midfielder, wing half-back, midfielder mostly with the club, wing half-back with the county. One of the most stylish players I'd say the club has ever had. And looked the part too, I suppose. Looked the part too. The only slight hiccup with Coochie was that his interest could wane a bit now and again, and you'd have a job getting him back up, tuned in again. But once you had him tuned in, he was all guns blazing and contributed hugely to a successful term of our history. So the next man up there, Peter the Great. As I said, these are in no particular order. Peter the Great, referred earlier to the current county teams. Does that flair player get on them now? They're so pigeonholed into what they should and shouldn't be doing. Peter would struggle, I would think, because he was one of these flair players. He was a player you paid in to see. You paid in to see Peter Duffy play. It's as simple as that. There's very few of them, even in the current day. There's very few people you can say that about. His pace obviously was his biggest asset, but he was a high fetcher of the ball as well. His scoring ability, he nearly didn't have to score because he was that threatening in his runs. He was fouled and fouled and fouled and fouled. He was a super player, Peter Duffy, and everybody knows that and everybody's aware of that. The unusual thing about Peter is that there would have been a persona at the time that maybe, Peter not too bothered, or Peter, he couldn't care less, or whatever the thing was. And Peter, at times, I'd say fueled it. He probably pushed that on a wee milestone just for the crack of it. But I can tell you, and a lot of boys can tell you along with me, when the door opened in the dressing room in Clontibbert or Clonus or whatever it was, Peter cared less. There was nobody more keen or nobody wanted to win more than Peter Duffy walking out the door of a dressing room. So he was next on my list. The next man, you can't take the field without this man. And inside the club, he's one of the most highly rated footballers we ever had. Outside the club, a lot of people probably don't even hear tell of him, and that's Emmy Brenner. Emmett Brennan was without doubt the best cornerback over a complete era of Blaney Faughs football, without a doubt. Even at wing half back, but as a cornerback, there was no better. There was no better in Monaghan, which is why it's unusual. He never really. Now, Emmy, by his nature, is a quiet fella and maybe wasn't too pushed or excited about county football. Maybe didn't mean much to him. But as a Faughs cornerback, wing half, there was none better than Emmett Brennan. None. So he'd have to be on this short list as you have shortened me down to. I'm actually down. I think I'm down to 1, 2. I'm down to 3 before the best of them all. Again, in no order. Morley Tavi, Morley Tavi, I'm keeping this up all night here. Morley Tavi, right? Of all the players I've named so far, nobody has the natural gifted ability that Morley Tavi had. He just was so natural in everything he done. He had the best left foot I ever seen. I suppose Paul Finley's the only man that has come along with as good as. But as a distributor of the ball, and his best place was number 6. As a distributor of the ball at centre half back, as a reader of the game, it came. He mightn't think it, but it looked have came so easy to him. He was so natural in what he was doing. Brilliant footballer, Morley Tavi. Next is a current man or very near, just gone off the scene, and what team can have a man without him as well is Strimmer, Dermot McArdle. What he has given the club is service wise. Like, I don't know what. He's 43, I know, and he's just stopped. If he is just stopped, but he's supposed to be stopped at the minute. Well, and the unusual thing is, if you were picking the team last year in Colin Donnelly's shoes, he would have to be on your first 6. He'd be the first 6 on your team sheet at this stage, completely for his whole organisational skills on the field, of him knowing where to be, and then knowing where everybody else should be, and telling them that. For that reason alone, at 43, he was more than worth his salt to be in the first 6 or 7 on any team sheet, in my opinion. Obviously, Colin was on the same line of thought. Service to play at this stage, not alone his county service, he played 12, 13 years county football. Him, Gary McQuaid, Damien Freeman, John Paul Moan would be sore to me that them 4 boys in particular missed out on an Ulster Championship medal after giving maybe 10 or 12 years top class service as top class players, Gary McQuaid included. To miss out by 1 year on the glory days, or the start of a couple of glory days, it's nearly a very disappointing thing for me. I can only imagine how it is for them, even though I'm sure they don't show it. But Dermot McArdle, definitely one of the greatest players I ever played with, and glad to have played with. I'm down to 1 before the top man himself. You're probably wondering who the 1 is now, but the 1 could possibly even be the number 2. I don't believe I've played with. My big thing, Stephen, would be, and I've related it to the minors. The first ingredient I want in a player is that he can't stand losing. It's the bottom line. Accept losing, yes, but your attitude is you can't stand losing, and in that way you're going to get the best out of yourself when you take the field. Now, if you want a definition in my time of a man that can't stand losing, Edwin Murphy is the man. I would nearly put him in as number 2 if I wanted to be rash about the thing. Unbelievable footballer. I've seen over the lockdown where people sending links of old matches. It's only when you look back, not that you were in any doubt, but if you look back and see the games and the influence that Eddie Murphy had, either at centre half, middle of the field, wing half back, wherever it was, and again went on and played his 10-year, whatever it was, county level, and give his all to the county as well. But as a passionate Faughs man, and that's what he is and still is to this day, he got involved afterwards and probably will be involved at some stage again. But Eddie Murphy, to me, defines the term can't stand losing. And if you have enough of them on the field, you'll not lose. So Eddie jumps in there as the last but not least man before the greatest player I ever played with. But I'm sure at this stage the odds has gone down. Is obviously the great himself, Nudie Hughes. Without doubt, the greatest, Stephen. I have no doubt. If my father was alive and here, he'd be telling me him or Jerry Fitch would push him, which is fine. That's great. I missed Jerry's main era, obviously, but he would be saying Jerry Fitch had tightened Nudie, and then others would say Eamon Tavi would be up there and would tighten him. But to me, in my time, and I think a lot of people will agree with me, I never seen any better than Nudie Hughes. not only in Blaney but in Monaghan. I never played with anybody better, and never seen anybody better. And again, that character thing I spoke about earlier, maybe in Flanagan and these boys bring a lot more than their football ability to the dressing room. They bring a bit of character, a bit of crack, motivation. They're just all round body language and everything. It's hard to put words for. I need somebody else to come in and explain it for me. It's hard to put words on how great a footballer that I think Nudie Hughes was. And not unlike what I said earlier, to this day, how great of a man Nudie Hughes is, as we're all aware, he's facing a bigger battle than he has ever faced on the field. And look how great a man he is there too. Like he can take it either ways. Give it to me on the field or give it to me in a medical term. I'll take it on anyhow, and that's just the way Nudie is. I'm delighted that I was playing when Nudie Hughes was playing.
Absolutely. There's not too many footballers in the country that get their mural put up on a wall in the town, and it's a fitting tribute to Nudie that we can see every day. Thanks for that. That was a very detailed list. I suppose the only man you did leave off in the end was Bugsy. So we're going to have to live with that, but sure. No harm, Bugsy.
I thought you were going to ask me about the best referee I ever experienced.
He wouldn't make that list either.
No, I know. You'd have to give him a wee bit. You'd have to give him a wee bit of credit. He was there on another good night where there was a good table of Faughs men getting his Referee of the Year award. I was getting a Hall of Fame. He was getting a referee, but I think the toss hit around a wee bit. So
keep them keen.
Keep them keen.
Couple of comments here for you. Anybody else to throw them in just before we finish up here? George in America wants to let you know the hardest player he ever played against was John Megan. Let her sail. Question here from Duxie for you in Dublin. When was the championship game in Contemporary and who was the opponent where Lockie went as spectator because he was injured but got tugged out in the dugout and went on, and whose boots did you wear?
Well, I actually do know. I do know this. It took me a minute. We were playing Emmy Vale in Clontibbert. I think it was a semi-final of a championship, and I was injured. Now, I had my gear. It wasn't somebody else's boots. McGrath, of course, was known for this. I think it was McGrath. If it wasn't then, it was Dickie and Fitch. But the Emmy Vale was strong at the time now. There were a couple of Hessenan brothers, and they weren't supposed to be giving us trouble, but they were. And I got the finger bent at half time to get in and get my clothes off me. So in and clothes off and into the middle of the field for the second half. But that used to happen on it. Happened Coochie one day too. I think up in Carrick, it used to happen notoriously in the older days where men were physically taken out of the crowds. They played maybe extra times and so on. And that's rash, but no, it did happen. Yeah, Emmy Vale in Clontibbert. Don't ask me the year, Porrick.
And another question here from Aidan. Do you remember the last championship winning team?
Who's that, Morley?
It's an Aidan. Could be Morley.
Right. Do I remember the last team? 03.
03, yeah.
No, no. I can't say I did. I actually was lucky to start that day. John Rafferty was over us, and I wasn't down to start. And when we landed to the castle for the meeting before it, Peter was sick, and Rafferty come to me and he says, "Are you fit to play?" And I says, well, "What do you mean I'm fit? Of course I'm fit to play." He says, "Peter's sick." So I ended up starting that day. So Peter came on later on in the game, as it turned out. We beat Latin in Clonus. I wouldn't like to start guessing the team, but no, I wouldn't.
No.
I know surely 10 or 12 of us, 10 or 12 was playing, but what the actual line out, I wouldn't be sure.
Yeah, if Aidan wants to find out, he can look at Joe Hanratty's work. It's all in there, and it's still available.
I should have took it with me.
Still available in Super Value or Loughman's or wherever it is around the time when we all get open. it's well worth a read. It's very detailed, and fair play to Joe Hannerty for putting it together. And of course, the proceeds go to the club as well. So thanks to Joe and that again. I think that's probably us there. We've nearly got 2 hours out of that. Absolutely flew through, and it's been an absolute pleasure talking to Declan and reliving them stories and going over the times. I without doubt, if we were here for another 2 hours and there was more that we could come up and talk about, we'd still be here for 2 hours. So it's an absolute pleasure, and thanks very much to Declan for his time. Thanks as well to Aoife and Philip from the club for doing the promo of the event and that on social media and setting it up for us on that end. All going well. We'll continue it next week. I have another guest lined up for next week. Waiting for him to give me the thumbs up, but he's 99% certain he'll be there for next week. So hopefully tomorrow, if you keep an eye on social media and that, we'll let you know who that is. But again, another brilliant Faughs legend, very interesting tales to tell, and it'll pass another Saturday evening as we get on with lockdown. I hope everybody stays safe. I know there's a couple of people in the club and around the town who've been under the weather recently, so very much all in our thoughts at the minute, and hope to see us back soon enough. So I think that's it for the evening. Once again, thanks to Declan. And I'd say before we go, Declan, get that apple tart into you.
No, I'll have to go hunting it down now, but I'm looking forward to next Saturday with your secret guest now. You can put him in the spot just as much as you put me, but good night's crack. I hope all that linked in enjoyed parts of it, and as you said, stay safe.
Yeah, no bother. Okay, thanks everybody, and just we have that recorded, so if anybody wants to listen back, we'll hopefully be able to make it available over the time. And so once again, thanks everybody, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Brilliant. Thanks, lads.
Now, Brian.
Really enjoyed that.
Thanks.